You're watching Telecom TV from IoT Solutions World Congress in Barcelona. And I'm joined now by Ben Salama, who is Managing Director of Accenture Digital. Ben, thanks for talking to us on Telecom TV. How can telcos best position themselves to create maximum value from the IoT opportunity?
So, I think telcos, of course, have been involved in IoT a long time before it was called IoT. When it was machine to machine. In those days, though, however, it only really made sense because of the economics to monitor very expensive assets, and typically they were moving assets. That was sort of the way the telco operated. IoT, of course, has changed all of that now. So with sensors being very cheap, with networks being very cheap, everything is going to get connected. And the telco really needs to figure out what is the role that they're going to play. What we see is that there are really sort of four key parts to the value chain for IoT. So one are the sensors and the devices themselves. The second is the communications and how is all that data going to be transmitted. The third is really the IoT platform, the cloud, and how will that data be processed. And the fourth is the analytics and the applications, how you're actually going to make value or create value out of that. So I think the telco needs to figure out within that four parts of the value chain, where do they want to play, where they're capable of playing, because they've got to be in at least one of them if they want to get any value out of this market.
And how can Accenture help with this transformation?
The role that we see ourselves playing within Accenture Digital and to really to help the telcos is to figure out sort of where we can help them be more effective in each part of that value chain. So to give you an example, we have been building over the last years a set of applications that are IoT-specific applications across a number of different industries. We're working with certain telcos for them to, say, white label or take those to market. We can help telcos fill out some of the system integration capability that they need. We can help them build the platforms and the clouds and the analytics that they need to bring to market.
Are we seeing a split in the admittedly vast IoT sector with the industrial IoT, as exemplified by this event here in Barcelona, as offering perhaps a more tempting opportunity?
Yes, is the answer. A lot of the hype around IoT, I think, has been generated around consumer connected devices. But I think the real value is going to be on the industrial side. And if you look at organizations like the World Economic Forum, they've identified, getting on for sort of $10 trillion worth of GDP uplift a year through the industries that are really driving the industrial Internet of Things.
If we take a look at some of the key vertical markets and perhaps start by looking at retail, what are the challenges that the retail sector is facing at the moment that IoT could help with?
I think if you look at retail, the big issues that most retailers are facing right now, having invested huge amounts of money and actually very successfully to create digital presence and online presence and mobile presence, the reality is that actually retailers cannot translate that experience in store. So the opportunity for IoT is exactly that. It's exactly how do you take the digital online presence and the mobile presence that is so effective, so a retailer knows exactly who's accessing their website, what products they're looking at, why they give up the journey, why they buy. How do you translate that into the retail environment? And that's where IoT has a huge role to play.
And what about the insurance market?
So I think insurance is actually one of the most transformative sectors that we're going to see for IoT, because the fascinating thing about insurance is that it incorporates, if you think about what is insurance? Insurance is all about risk management, basically, and pricing that risk. Now, the minute that you can actually monitor what is happening to people, to physical assets, to property, to vehicles, all of a sudden, if you understand what's happening to those and how they're being used, it completely changes the way you manage risk. So insurance companies are totally besotted by IoT and fascinated by IoT, and we're seeing huge opportunities around pay-as-you-drive insurance, around connected home technologies that insurance companies can use to better understand what's in the house and what's in a commercial building, or associated security.
And healthcare is another vertical that's generating a lot of interest from IoT at the moment.
I think healthcare falls into a number of different opportunities related to IoT. Obviously, in every single country in the world, the cost of healthcare is spiraling, so countries and governments want to offer healthcare as best as they possibly can, as economically as they possibly can, but to improve conditions. And IoT has a huge role to play in terms of post-operative care, for example, in-home care, all the way through to making sure people are taking their medication, or even understanding if, say, a vulnerable person has fallen over or an elderly person needs assistance. So I think we're going to see a dramatic change in the way healthcare is delivered over the next few years thanks to IoT.
And we can't talk about IoT without referring to the ecosystem. It's a vast ecosystem, perhaps the biggest that industry has ever seen, but with so many companies involved, how can we ensure interoperability and maximize the benefit of this ecosystem?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, IoT, probably more than any other technology that we've seen, in recent history, is much more dependent on a global ecosystem in order to function effectively. I think the really interesting thing from the telcos perspective is IoT plays to some huge strengths that the telcos have got. So security, reliability, interoperability, the ability to do billing, provisioning. I mean, all of those things are things that telcos have been successfully doing for many, many years. They're all critical to IoT. And I think that's something that telcos need to understand, how they leverage those advantages to make sure they're a key player in the industry going forward.
Ben, thank you very much indeed.